Hey everybody, Carrie Hoffmeister here with my show Carrie on Abundant TV. I'm super excited for today's show. My guest I found, I guess you could say by accident of me just being in a bookstore, but I'm super excited to welcome author Pepper Basham. Welcome, Pepper.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to get to be with you today.
I'm so excited to have you on. We're going to talk a little bit more in a minute about how I found her. We're going to go ahead and start with a new little segment that we're going to do called Carry On the Questions. So it's going to be 1 minute of rapid fire questions, just like randomness. And it's just kind of a way to break the ice and for people to get to know you with maybe some questions that we wouldn't normally ask during the interview. So let me get my timer here ready. All right, are you ready, Pepper?
I'm ready, I think.
Okay, here we go. What is your favorite color?
Green.
What is your favorite animal?
Dog.
What is your favorite season?
Fall.
What is your favorite month?
October.
What is your favorite food?
Dessert or salty?
What is your favorite word?
Grace.
Oh, that's a good one. What word do you hate hearing?
Deadline.
What word do you have a hard time pronouncing?
Oh, I don't know. I can't think of a word.
That's okay. Move on. Who do you text most?
Who do I text most?
Yeah.
My daughter, Lydia.
What is your favorite book you've written?
Bad question. It's impossible. It's impossible to pick a favorite.
Really? Who is your favorite person that has ever interviewed you?
Well, I'm liking the current one so far.
Yes, that's the correct answer.
The correct answer.
That's what you're supposed to say.
Right. Okay, good. I wasn't prompted for that one earlier. So I'm glad I could get it off the cuff.
Yeah,
there.
that's a trick one. You did good. You did good. That was good. Oh, that's fun. Okay, so I found Pepper. I actually was at Barnes and Noble with my daughter, my 13-year-old stepdaughter who loves to read. We have totally different taste in like what we read though. So she's like off in the dystopian that section, and I was just randomly looking at like Christian books and fiction and things like that. So my problem is I'm in a book club and we try to do clean reading, which I feel like these days it's getting harder.
Yeah.
And then when you have like and this is not bashing anybody else, but sometimes Christian fiction can be really cheesy or just like, oh man, this is like, okay. So actually what caught my attention was the cover. So this is called Authentically Izzy. Woo!
Yes, it's beautiful.
It is. And so it caught my eye because it looks a lot like the regular like romantic fiction books out there right now. I feel like there's like a theme with all of them. Mm-hmm. And you don't normally see this with Christian fiction. I was like, oh, so then I read the back and I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a try. I took it home. I was reading another book at the time as a part of our book club, and I couldn't put this one down. I eventually had to because we were getting ready to meet for book club, and I was like, I have to read my book club book. So I read that one first, and then I finished it, and I was like, I have to have Pepper on the show because I love this book. So I looked you up, and then I saw that there's going to be a sequel to it coming out in August, which I was so pumped about. So if you need anyone to read it early, I'm your girl.
Oh, I will hold you to that. After this, we will need to exchange information.
Yes, because I seriously, I have a friend I told about it, and she actually ordered it. She's going to be reading it. And I've been telling all my friends, it's so good. So I've talked enough about it, but Pepper, tell us a little bit about your background first, how you got into writing books, how long have you been writing books, and just tell us a little bit about your story there.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it short. It's a long story. And I'm Southern, so I have a tendency to go long anyway.
I love it.
I have pretty much been in a storytelling world my whole life. I grew up in Appalachia, and it's known for oral storytelling of all different kinds of stories and family history. So I grew up with a grandmother who was really big at telling family history stories. And so I fell in love with stories really early. and started writing them. I have one of my earliest stories that I wrote when I was 10 and illustrated poorly. And so I still have that. But I'd loved stories forever. It just took a long time to get to the publishing world because my day job is a speech language pathologist. And so I was going to school, then I was working full time as a speech pathologist. I have 5 children. And so writing kind of happened in the background during all that time. And so when I really could get to the point of pursuing it, it took quite a few years to get to publication and on to where I am now with HarperCollins. Thomas Nelson has been amazing. So that's the very brief version of lots of rejections and lots of hard work and lots of trusting God to have a plan that I can't see. And that's been the neat thing to be able to look back on all the places, as we all do in our lives,
Right.
look back on the places where you're like, oh, that's what he was doing. Oh, that's what he was trying to make stronger in me, you know? And so at this point, it's a really good thing to be able to look back and see that because it was a long process.
Yeah. Well, you're an amazing writer. I love this book so much. So tell us, I don't even know if I said the title. I was too excited about it. It's called Authentically Izzy.
Yep.
Tell us the story behind this. First of all, how did you come up with this book? And then tell us a little bit about what it's about.
Okay, so just really at first, my previous books are all written pretty typical narrative, right? You have usually a hero's point of view, the heroine's point of view, alternating throughout the story in third person. That's been my typical jam of writing. So that's what I like to do. And I love writing romance. That's my main genre. And I love that you said that this story kind of drew you in and it wasn't cheesy, because I know what you mean a little bit with that. Some Christian fiction books can either tag Jesus on at the end or over inundate you with more preachiness. And there's nothing wrong with preaching, but there's a difference between a storytelling and a preaching. They're two different callings. And so one of the things I really love doing is making it an organic sort of part of the story. And every story has a different way that I feel the Christian message comes out. And some it's more subtle. And Izzy, it's a subtle kind of undercurrent. And in some of my other contemporaries, it has a little bit more overt, but I still want it to be organic to the story, not cheesy. You know, so thank you for saying that. I started Izzy. Every story has a different kind of inspirational moment. None of mine have ever come the same way. And I was just daydreaming one day, and this idea of what it would be like for two people to meet online who would never have met otherwise. And I knew from the start that Izzy was terrified of flying. So I knew from the start Izzy was terrified of flying and that her romantic interest would be somebody who lived on an island. So
that's like, well, awesome.
that'll be a great conflict. But what happened was I had just started writing the story and COVID shut down everything.
Oh man.
And but in a way that made the story even more real to me because the world went online and you were having conversations with people on Zoom and you had lost that physical connection. So how do you continue to develop those relationships in a way that's not quite as typical as it was before? And I started talking with my friends who were introverts who were like, I love this setup. I don't have to go up. And so it kind of all meshed together to make Izzy. And Izzy was so fun to write. It is written in epistolary form, which is through emails, texts. Most of the book is in epistolary form, which is not everybody's favorite, but in this way, it just seemed to work really well for the story.
It did. And real quick, I've read a book before that was like that, and I couldn't hold my interest. And because I had a problem picturing like who the people were, who was I talking to? I couldn't keep track of it. But in this book, I actually enjoyed it more when it was that way. And it was kind of weird because I was like, when I first saw that, I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. And I was like, oh, I like loved it. I could picture every single person. And I loved it when they would email back and forth. Like, I loved it so much.
Well, what was interesting for me as the writer is that Izzy was so closed off
Hmm.
that the only way it seemed natural to introduce her to people reading was through her own words.
Hmm.
And so that happened through these emails with her cousins because we really get okay, so a little side story. Have you ever found letters or read about stories where people have found letters that were hidden away and after they died
Yes.
you pull out?
Yes.
Okay, you that teaches you something about people that you didn't know before, perhaps, or it only
Yes.
secures what you already knew about them, right? we
Right.
have we have love letters of my mother-in-law and father-in-law that we'd never gotten to read until after she passed away, and there was something about that intimacy of the communication that let me know things about her that I wouldn't have known otherwise about her personality. And so there was something about that same kind of feeling when I
Mhm.
was writing Izzy. She's so introverted and so kind of not herself
Yeah.
that we got to really see who she was in this kind of mode. So I think that worked well for the story.
I loved it. I loved the quirkiness of who she is.
Yeah.
And I was telling my friend about it, and she was like, "Oh, I have to read that." I love it when they're quirky and they're like relatable, because sometimes when they're just like this put together, Barbie, or nothing against Barbie, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to relate to certain things, and it was just so relatable. It was like something that I feel like really probably has happened. And like I would kept thinking this would make a really great movie. Like this
Oh,
is just so good. And
that would be so
for,
fun.
yeah, that would be so fun. I can play Izzy. Let's do it. So
Right? You couldn't have long dark hair.
there we
Totally
go.
great.
It's
You have
done.
brown eyes
Done, done.
too, right?
Love it. If anybody that's wanting to make a movie is watching, here we go.
You guys, we have it perfect. Oh,
This
I do.
there we go.
I did. One of the things I loved most, I think, was the family dynamics. I loved creating the family dynamics within that story. And I adore Brody and I adore all the romantic stuff that happens throughout the story.
Yes.
But the family dynamics just were so much fun.
They were fun to read. And I love, I don't want to give too much away, but it's Izzy whose parents, they pass away when she's younger, and she's raised by her aunt and her uncle, and so she's really close with her cousins, and so that's who she's emailing throughout the whole book. And when she meets this guy online, but then she ends up meeting a guy in person that she's kind of going on dates with. And
Yeah.
so it's like she has this dream guy overseas, and then you have that like fear of like, is this guy really real? Because is he catfishing me? Like, what's going on here? And she has a terrible fear of flying. So, and he lives in a different, like he lives on an island. And so it's like all these things, and they're just both quirky and weird, but it's like awesome. And so, but the connection in the towards the end of where she kind of becomes her own and didn't realize maybe the things she was holding back because she was raised by people that, weren't her biological parents. And
Hmm.
I feel like that's relatable too, because I'm sure that there's so many people that deal with that, and they find themselves, as they get older. Um, but so I read this book, and then I saw that there is a sequel coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about
Sure.
this? Because I think I read on your Instagram on a comment that it's about
Penelope.
Penelope.
It's the Penelope, positively Penelope. And if you read book one or you read book one before Positively Penelope comes out in August, you'll realize that Penelope is the optimistic fairy tale dreamer. Everything's going to be okay. Lighthearted, theater loving shoe fetish girl.
Aw.
And so the fun part, I'm really concerned about writing book three because that's my favorite character who becomes the main character. But
And that'll be Luke,
Penelope,
right?
that would be Luke. That would be
Okay.
Luke. But book two is Penelope. I mean, I love all the characters, but he's been like he's like a warm hug that you didn't know you needed kind of
He
person.
is.
So Penelope was I was really concerned about writing her story and making her a main character because she's so young acting and so happy and all of these things, and sometimes she's silly.
Yes.
And and so I'm like, oh, people are not going to be able to relate to her because this is who she is, and how do I make her a main character?
Mhm.
But it was an amazing, fun adventure because I have two daughters who both are mostly positive, optimistic young ladies. And having people underestimate you because you're happy or because you're joyful is a
Mhm.
consistent problem. I have it happen to me. I'm a mostly positive, optimistic person, and
Same.
people underestimate that you've never had trouble in your life,
Mhm.
that you're not really smart sometimes,
Mhm.
and I really wanted to take that concept and run with it with her and show
Mhm.
that she has depth and she has compassion and she has had struggles in her life, but she's choosing joy. She's choosing the positive over the negative, and to kind of celebrate because um, as Christians, we are supposed to be joyful people.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean everything's always hunky dory and rainbows, and so, but it is a state of being because we know what we who we are in Christ, right?
Mhm.
And so getting to write her was so much fun. She's a Julie Andrews nut. And so she wants to be everything Julie Andrews. And of course, Julie Andrews is the ultimate happy to
Mhm.
her in
She
her
is.
mind.
Yes.
And so it really was fun to take that concept and try to show um, how people can make quick judgments. And for her, her growth, Izzy's growth was learning to, you know, find her identity
Mhm.
and know who she really was and find out who she was. And Penelope's is kind of the same. It's a little different because it fits Penelope. She's really trying to figure out, she's always had these fairy tale ideas of romance, and
Mhm.
she's trying to figure out what really matters. What's on the stage is not always what happens behind the scenes.
Okay.
And so basically that's an idea behind her story.
I am excited to read that. I feel like I can really relate to that one too when you were saying about like being positive and happy all the time and sometimes people think it's fake,
Hmm.
especially people who aren't Christians, and they're like, "Oh, they're just so fake." And I'm like, "Really happy to see you. Like this isn't fake." Like, and that's just spreading the joy of the Lord. Like that's really what having the joy of the Lord
Hmm.
is you can live in joy and have joy and
Hmm.
happiness and like you said, we do have times, it's not going to always be like that, but with God on our side, it's a little bit easier. So,
Right.
tell me
Well,
a little bit about, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, happiness is situational and joy is consistent. Joy
Yes.
is what's underneath when the circumstances are up here. It's that
Yes.
solid foundation of I know the happy ending to this story and
Hmm.
everything's going to work out okay,
Hmm.
right? And the happiness, it's what comes and goes when you get to be on a TV interview with Carrie, and it's
Aw.
part of that too. So, but it's really wonderful as Christians to have that solid foundation, like you said, that constant of knowing God is near. He's
Yes.
right with you. And that's the joy that comes from that knowledge. So, yeah, you were going to say, sorry.
No, that was good. I'm glad you added that. That was really good. But and this goes along with that. So, have you always been a Christian? Tell us a little bit about your Christian journey.
Yeah.
Because you're a Christian author, and
Yes.
we talked about that. It was like a little bit here and there in the book, but it was like so perfect in the moments that I feel like people who read it that aren't Christians, it could pique a little bit of interest of being like, oh, well, what does that mean? Or like, I'm gonna Google this or whatever it is. It's like that, just that little bit that
Hmm.
really just get like, the wheels turning in someone's brain. So tell us a little bit
Right.
about your journey with that.
Well, I was raised, like I told you before, in Appalachian family, Appalachian culture. So it's this big extended family who all just take you in hand and know all your stuff, whether you want them to or not, because we're all close to each other and physically and emotionally. And so when I was young, I was raised in church. I became a Christian when I was 5. But as I think is true for most Christians, there comes a time in your life, and mine was right around the age of 19 and 20, where I was hit with the question, is this faith really yours, or is it what you've been told to believe?
Mm,
And I struggled for about a year of trying to make sure that all these things that I'd grown up believing were really the truth that was a part of my life
mm,
and that God really held me as a person, not just the concept, And so I struggled with that for about a year of just making sure, I mean, continually we're constantly learning and growing and
Right.
hopefully getting closer to Jesus. But that moment in time, that year was a really great thing in my heart because it made me, whereas before I wasn't secure,
Mm-hmm.
it started that process of me being secure in who I am in Christ. Now I'm still growing in that because that's a lifelong lesson, um but knowing we struggle in this culture so much with identity,
Mm-hmm.
and that has been a wonderful, like, foundation, again, a solid thing to know I'm called by name.
Mm-hmm.
I'm his. That comes with security,
Mm-hmm.
and so whatever happens, all the periphery, the hurt, the struggles, the injustice, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
is not changing the fact of my security. So, hopefully from that point on, I've continued to grow. Certainly through writing, it's been a great processing of grief and a processing of joys and of human nature. um, Being a parent is definitely that.
Oh yes. Yep.
God uses parenthood to really refine our spirits, I think.
We need the Lord. Yes. For
but
sure.
also but also that it's also teaching us, wow, if we love these kids this much and God loves us even more, wow, what that must be like, how secure we really are, how loved we really are. So yeah, that's a general idea of
Yeah.
my life.
So what kind of response have you seen, not just with this book, maybe with all of them? I haven't read any of the other ones because I just found you, but I plan to. So but what kind of response have you seen with non-Christians and then also Christians? Like tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Well, I have some good friends. I work in a secular environment, so I have friends who are all different kinds of belief systems out there and have different faiths or no faith, they think. And so it's been really interesting to be able to have lifelong conversations with people who think very differently than me, and I think that's good for everybody to have opportunities like that. But in story wise, a lot of my novels are more overtly Christian. Um,
Okay.
they have uh, one series I think you might enjoy is called the Mitchell's Crossroads series, and it's a very small town Appalachian community,
Hmm.
Andy Griffith-esque, um,
Okay.
but modern. But it's like reading a Hallmark movie with teeth, um, because it has that deeper spiritual,
Okay. Yeah.
vibe in it. But it's got humor, and so I've had lots of good responses to those stories that have taken place in my culture, but they've been overtly Christian, especially among the Christian community, because I really do try to make the Christian theme organic to the story, organic to the characters, and that's really important to me because I don't want to read something that doesn't feel like it was real to them,
Yeah.
right? Um, but in the non-Christian community, I've gotten mixed results from people reading Izzy. Izzy's been my biggest selling book ever, so I've gotten a
Oh,
lot more
congrats.
reader. Yeah, I know, it's great. It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Um, but I've gotten a lot of different readers across the board, and
Mhm.
there have been a mix. There have been a lot of people who are not Christians who've read it and just really enjoyed the story for the story's sake. They enjoyed something positive and hopeful, that didn't feel like you had to have all the angst.
Right.
And fine, the angsty books are fine. They have their readers too. I'm not saying they
Yeah.
don't, but sometimes you just want that book to read that makes you go, okay, the world is a happy place.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, and then I've had some non-Christian readers who I actually had somebody say, I snuck Jesus into this story. And if they're going
Yeah.
to say that, I don't mind that because I wasn't sneaking him. I mean, he's a part of the story from the beginning,
Yeah.
but that they didn't respond well to the subtle themes in there. And so
Okay.
there are those people, but I think I don't mind that,
Yeah.
because there are going, I mean, what Jesus says, his name's going to be a stumbling block
Right.
to them. Um, so that's okay. That's okay. If that maybe opened up a question mark in their heads, then
Mhm.
all good stuff. But most of it's been positive. That some people really don't like the epistolary style, so it's not been so much the faith elements as it has been the format that's caused
Okay.
people to have less excitement about this
Oh,
story than some of my others. So yeah.
I guess you're gonna have a little bit of everything, but that's
Yep.
good to get reactions. Yeah.
Yep. Well, and
Well,
it's a really good lesson for me to go to take things as they come and go, okay, not every story's for everybody. I write historical Appalachian romances, and they're based on family history, and
yeah,
they have a little bit more overt Christianity, which is usually easier to get by with in historicals,
right.
because people were more generally Christian.
Yeah.
So, um, but yeah, so all different kinds.
Will Penelope be in the same format?
Yes.
Good.
As I don't know if Luke will. Luke's book number 3.
Okay.
His comes out in, I think, May 2024. He's not a big chatter. He's not a big talker. So I'm
That's true.
curious
Yeah.
how the formatting's gonna work for him when I start writing his book next month.
Yay. I'm so excited. Well, okay, so how can people find you and how can they get your book?
Oh yes. So Authentically Izzy is sold anywhere books are sold. They're also they a lot of people have been able to find it in Walmart, which has
Oh,
been
wow.
neat. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I was surprised by that too. Amazon, Baker Book House, which is a
Yes.
small Christian book house. Um, so that, and you can learn more about my books on my website at pepperdbasham.com. So all of my books are there. Information about me and my awesome family is there. So yeah, that kind of stuff is a great way to learn more about me and my stories.
Yes. Yes. Go follow her on Instagram and go get the book Authentically Izzy wherever books are sold. I promise that you will love it. It's such a good read. So thank you so much, Pepper, for being on the show today. I hope that people watch this and they go buy your book, and um just watch out also for her new book that's going to be coming out in August, which is going to be Penelope's story. And that will make more sense when you read the first one. So you have to read the first one to understand why we're talking about Penelope. So
Yes.
thank you so much. It was such a joy to have you on the show.
Thank you. It was a joy for me too.
You're welcome. And thank you all for watching Abundant TV. And thank you for supporting my new show. I was told that I was in the top 5 for the most watched. So I'm really excited about that. And so thank you all for watching. I just love talking to people, and that's what I get to do. So thanks for watching Abundant TV. And until next time, carry on.
Carry on.